no way. It shows, for one, that the government can't sell it.
Today, the sinister story behind Julia Gillard's attack on the Murdoch press. Malcolm Turnbull fires at Tony Abbott and shoots his foot. The Czech president warns Australia global warming is a con. And Abbott on the size of his Speedos. I have Andrew Bolt, and this is the Bolt Report. Today, something different. I'm going to talk about exactly what Julia Gillard wants me to. No, not attacks and not bow people, not her shocking poll figures. No, let's talk about her threats against the media, especially the Murdoch newspapers she claims are touched by Britain's News of the World scandal.
And I think that does mean that Australians here look at News Limited and they've probably got some hard questions that they want answered.
It's hard to believe now, but at the last election, Gillard was backed by most newspapers, including half the ones of Rupert Murdoch's News Limited. But it was soon obvious she wasn't up to the job, and some of the Murdoch papers, including my own, became critical. No wonder, you might say, but the government smelled a conspiracy. In fact, Communications Minister Stephen Conroy last October accused Murdoch papers, like The Australian, of trying to overthrow the government.
Well, they've been waging a war since just before the election was finished, creating stories that are completely untrue. This just is part of an ongoing tantrum by the Australian newspaper about the outcome of the election.
Now, ever since, the government has wanted to slap the Murdoch papers into line. Already it's blocked, effectively, a government contract about to go to Sky News, part owned by News. But now it's got its big chance.
I would just like to say one sentence. This is the most humble day of my life.
It's turned out that journalists on one Murdoch paper in Britain, the News of the World, hacked phones and bribed police for information. No one's ever accused Murdoch's Australian papers of such behaviour, which is illegal anyway. But Gillard and the Greens finally had an excuse to threaten them with new laws on their ownership and even, said Greens leader Bob Brown, what mix of opinions to run.
There's quite a bit of concern I'm fed back from within the media, from working journalists, about the narrow range of media opinion.
Gillard followed Brown's lead, as you'd expect.
I anticipate we'll have a discussion amongst parliamentarians about this, about the best review and way of dealing with all of this.
Independent MP Rob Oakeshott, who props up Gillard and has his own erratic performance under media fire, also backed an inquiry yesterday accusing media owners, say Rupert Murdoch, of dabbling in politics. So, we need laws now against criticising even the bizarre Oakeshott? And this week, Privacy Minister Brendan O'Connor claimed the British scandal proved we also needed new laws against journalists getting too personal.
It has shone a light on the concern that people have about the rights of people's privacy.
You know what a privacy law means? It means powerful people can stop journalists exposing them as hypocrites. You see the pattern. This government and its allies are blackmailing the media into going soft. Of course, there's another explanation for Gillard picking this fight. She wants people like me to talk about things like this, rather than say, her tax. And hey, she's won. Barry Cohen was a Labor politician for more than 2 decades and served in the Hawke government as a Minister for the Environment as well as for Home Affairs and the Arts, and he joins me now. Barry, Julia Gillard and the Greens threatening the Murdoch newspapers with inquiries after they've talked about regime change is a bit sinister, isn't it?
Well, I think it's quite extraordinary. You know, we've got a lot of problems occurring in Britain and there's no attempt to hush that up, and it's getting wide publicity and inquiries and parliamentary discussions and debate. What's that got to do with Australia? I mean, no one's suggesting for one moment that this is happening here. So I think inquiries are just a lot of nonsense.
It seems to me it's probably meant more as a distraction as well, or in part, from the Gillard government's woes over the carbon dioxide tax, which seems to be going down like a lead balloon.
Well, I'm not sure. I've got no idea what. I'm not going to, accuse them of doing something that I don't know anything about. But I certainly got a lot of interest in carbon pricing, which I hope we'll come to this morning.
Yeah, well, the carbon dioxide tax, you're a former Minister for the Environment. Are you for such a thing? Is a whole global warming catastrophe something that alarms you?
What concerns me is that in all the debate and discussion that's gone on now for some years, no mention is made of the fact that 1/3 of Australia's carbon emissions come from bushfires. It's bushfires emissions are ignored in the carbon abatement program, totally.
But is that significant in terms of what the government's proposing? It's got a tax on all our emissions from industries. Are you saying it should be talking about things like bushfires instead?
We should be doing something about bushfires. And when you ask them why they aren't, they say, oh, Kyoto was the banned the calculation of natural disasters, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, you name it. But I said, why did you include bushfires in there? And they said, well, that's because it's a natural disaster. I said, hang on a minute. According to the police, or according to the science, 1/3 of Australia's carbon emissions come from bushfires. And they say, well, that's a natural disaster. I said, no, it's not. Probably, according to the police, there are about 54,000 bushfires a year in Australia, average, and of that, 20 to 30,000 are arson. How is arson a natural disaster?
Are you convinced, though, of the overall theory that man is causing the world to heat dangerously?
I don't know. To comprehend what's going on in this area, you need about 14 different scientific disciplines. You can get caught up in this argument. I think it probably is, but I don't think it's as bad as we imagine it to be. And obviously, the rest of the world doesn't think this. China, India, America, they're just not interested in it. So, but what my concern is that where we do have carbon emissions that we can control, we're doing absolutely nothing about it.
Right. The whole emphasis, though, this catastrophising about global warming and pushing what seems to me a green agenda, is that something that dismays you a bit as a former Environment Minister?
Well, the Greens dismay me quite a lot. I've had a lot of dealings with them. They're not the same as they were when I was Minister. I mean, I had a lot more people who were genuinely concerned about the environment, who took it up as an issue. I mean, the trouble is that with the collapse of communism, the left wing of the Labor Party, they've infiltrated the Greens and now, to a great degree, control it.
Yes, I'm afraid that sounds correct. Barry, look, thank you so much for joining us and good luck to you. Coming up, he meant to hurt, but has Malcolm Turnbull just done Tony Abbott a favour? I'll be back with our panel, Michael Kroger and Michael Costa.